So we're talking March Madness. There's NHL going on, there's NBA going on right now, but I think what everybody is looking at is this March Madness coming up. So I'm going to run through uh, how I'm playing this weekend, and call it bracketology. I hate that word, but that's kind of what it is. There's a whole industry dedicated to people making a living off of being bracketologists. Um, I'm gonna rant a little bit again about sportsbook and my experience in Vegas, and take it for what it's worth. I'm gonna talk about this weekend's games, and then I'm gonna talk about some of these larger spreads and what my money making approach to some of these bigger spreads is. And let's get right into it. I'm gonna go sportsbook first, and I'm saying this because we're all in this group. We're all traders. We're all in this to be trading stocks and options and whatever your particular flavor is. And I'll say this: I was in Vegas a couple weeks ago, and I found myself in a sports on my app, and I was also, and I talked about this last week. I was also talking to some people that were watching games, and I noticed a guy had an app open, and he was in the MGM app, and that only works if you're in a bet legal state. But he was placing live action, and we started to talk, and we were joking around about it. And he said, "Yeah, I come to the sports books. I'll lay my bet if I like the odds, but then I do most of my action through the web page. They don't do live betting at these sports books." And I bring that up because, again, you look at some of these stocks that have taken a run, and all based off of sports betting getting legalized. And I'll just tell you, I'm a consumer. Everybody on this sports bet page that pays attention to the things that we're doing, whether it's football or other sports, I am a sports betting consumer. And I prefer not to go to the sports book and lay my action. And I don't see why anybody would want to do that when you have more options on your app, and you also rack up points on the app. And so I say that because I mean, I'm not a buyer of any of the stocks that are dependent on sports betting, just because I find it very frustrating. And then the other piece is you got to stay there for the entire 3 hours, or you got to find a way to make time to get yourself back there to go get paid. The only true benefit I saw it being at the sports book was I get a physical ticket. And if I wanted to place a futures bet and sell it like on prop swap, you see those guys that made a $10 bet on Jacksonville to win the Super Bowl, and Jacksonville finally, they make their way into the playoffs, and then they can sell that $20,000 payoff, rather that $10 investment on prop swap. You can turn around and sell that bet for less than the total, and people bid on it. That's really the only benefit I saw. So I'm just throwing that out there as my 2 cents, because I personally didn't. The sports books were cool to be in, cool to look around, and all the screens everywhere. But just purely the betting product, I mean, I'm trying to make money. I'm not looking for that feeling of cheering and going up and cashing a ticket and watching them count my cash. Physical cash, I'm just going to spend it irresponsibly and not respect it anyway. So that's my 2 cents about that. I'm not. I don't believe in the future of sports betting and the stocks that are dependent on it. And that's just where I sit. And I can't be the only person that shares that emotion. And I was talking to a gentleman in the sports book that lived in Vegas that did most of his betting through his app. So that's my rant about the legal sports betting, and where I sit with it. I'm going to talk about March Madness. So there's March Madness in the sense of the way you fill out your bracket to win your office pool, or the money pool, or the bracket down at the local bar. That's one approach, and that's kind of like the fantasy football approach. When you're breaking down a football game, you're thinking about who's going to score a touchdown, and there's the DraftKings approach to it. But it's totally different than when you're looking at individual games and where to lay your action and how to make money. And there's this common belief out there that you there's all these crazy upsets, right? Number 16 is going to beat number 1. And if you go back, just look at last year, look at the previous year. I mean, you can very easily find completed brackets as to the way they go. Most of what you're seeing is pretty chalky, and where the upsets are taking place, you can make them make sense. There's always something there. But if you're going to spend your time trying to make money through chasing the upsets, I don't think that you're going to find very much success in this March Madness tournament. That being said, looking at these games this weekend, It's there are some very large point spreads, but on the bracket side of it, from a strategic standpoint, to win your $20 pool and all the money in the bucket, it probably makes sense to take some underdogs, just because if everybody's taking favorites, you probably separate yourself with your potential points total than the next guy. But it's a totally different approach than what I'm looking at for the actual teams. So what I'm looking at, most of what I'm doing with sports in general right now is live action. And with football, I would say I was probably 60-40 pregame to live action, because there's a lot more pregame spreads that are just better than what you're going to find in the middle of the game. So as always, I would say there's no reason to bet on a game that you cannot watch. If you are not in front of the screen or planning on being in front of the screen, you're taking away an advantage that you have, which is the watching the game, understanding the flow, and the live betting. Um, the old days of betting, you would lay your action with your bookie, and you didn't even have to watch the games. You could just read the newspaper the next day and go and collect your money. But now, if you're about to lose, you can fight back, and you can place two or three bets to where the first one didn't even matter. So for me, the only time I'm laying action up front is if, one, I like an underdog and I like the points that they're getting, and I feel like that underdog is going to keep it close early, and I won't have a chance of catching the same amount of points as a live game. Two, if I like a underdog outright, I like the underdog to win the game money line. Or if I like a favorite and I think that point spread is so far off that I got to hit it now, because once the game gets started, they're going to blow them out. So that's where I go with it. I'm going to go into some games and examples of how I'm approaching it, and specifically some of the larger spreads. I'm just going to start with the Illinois. If you look at Illinois, they're a 22 and a half point favorite to win the game. That's a lot of points. I'm not comfortable laying 22 and a half points on any game. I don't think there's a reason to. If the game starts and Illinois scores a three-pointer first, that spread's going to go to 25. The only way you're going to catch a discount on that is if Illinois somehow it goes 5 minutes into the game, and there's only a 2 point margin there. But I don't think you're going to find that discount. What I'm looking at in a game like that, I'm looking at the first half over. The first half over Illinois is 39, uh, or 39 and a half, depending on which book you use and where the action is. But the last I looked at it, it was 39. So Illinois just simply has to have over 39 points in the first half. I don't care what they're winning by. They could be losing, and Illinois having over 39 points pays. And so I think if you look at that, the way I would approach that game is you go into it, you lay your action on Illinois 39 for the first half. You cash a ticket. You cash a ticket for the first half, and then if you want to get back into the game, like let's just say Illinois is losing, right? Illinois is losing 41-39. Well, now you take half the profit from that win and you put it on something else. Maybe you put it on Illinois money line if they're losing, or maybe they're only winning by 5. And if they're only winning by 5, that spread moved. It's no longer 22 and a half. You might be able to lay 12, and that's a huge discount. I would say you go there. And I say you win your first half, you go into something else on that game for half the profit of that win. And that way you can't lose. You're still plus money for the day. You go into it that way, and or you walk away from the game. You can walk away from the game, and you can take half the profit from that and put it on something else, a different live action bet. Maybe there is a favorite that's losing that you can find your discount on point spread, or maybe we're off to a slow start with a team that scores a lot of points, and you find a discount on the team individual over for the first half. Take half the profit of that, and when you win that, you're now up 1.5 bets. Now you go back for some. Now you can look at the next game for a full on unit bet, but you've protected yourself. The key is you cash that first ticket. You have to cash that first win, and then you have options. If you find yourself chasing that first win, Colin, you're on this. We found that the other night. We were overexposed and hadn't cashed a ticket, and thank God thank God Edmonton scored the points that they needed to score to break us even. But it was reckless of me to go in that way, and we were just overexposed. You got to cash that first ticket first. But again, Illinois, a 22-point favorite. I'm looking at the first half over. I'm not even looking at them to cover any specific amount of points because I just don't like 22 and a half. Too many things can happen. What if their star player injures himself, which it could happen, and then it's a totally different game. I'm looking at the Ohio State game minus 16. I think that's too many points. If you're to play the Ohio State game, that's also on Friday. If you're going to play that Ohio State game, I would tell you to let the game get started if you're on the Ohio State side. And I know you guys all know that I love Ohio State, but I believe that they're not going very far in this tournament. They're pretty inconsistent, but they're playing Oral Roberts. I, I I like their chances of winning, but I still don't like them to cover 16. If you're going to play that game, I would take the points on the other side. You might even be able to catch it at plus 20 if Ohio State scores a couple real early. But you know, we go into the Baylor game. Baylor is Baylor is a 25 and a half point favorite. So when I look at 25 and a half point favorite, where I go, again, I go to the first half. I go to the first half, and the first half over is 37 points, 37 and a half points. So in order for when you and then you look at the first half spread, the first half spread is 14 and a half. So if Baylor's going to win the first half by 14 and a half, we'll just add that to the score, right? So you start with 14 and a half. Well, now they only need to score another 22 points for you to get that first half over and cash a ticket. The other one that I like there is the total of 66 and a half, right? So if you just take the first half spread of 14, they have to put at least that many points on the board in order to cover that spread. So you throw that out there, and so 66 minus the 14. Well, now we only need 52 points or 53 points in order to cash. And so we're looking for participation trophies. Everybody can participate, and yeah, it's Hartford, but they're going to score some points. They're not going to get shut out in the first half. So on a Baylor game, rather than kill yourself and watch them win by 24 and they didn't cover the spread, and you're angry at yourself for that, I think the smart play is you got two early pieces, 66 and a half points. Baylor may put up 42 points in the first half. So they're not really asking for much help from the other guy. So if Baylor gets 37 points, they're probably going to get 42 or 43. So then we really only need Hartford to put up a very small amount of points. So in that game, rather than lay the huge points, I'm going to minimize my risk, and I'm going to lay two pieces in the first half. And when we hit them both, well, again, half the profit into the next bet, half of the profit from one bet into the next one, or the next game, and that's the way you do it. You got that ticket cashed, and we're looking at what was it? It was Baylor, Ohio State was the other one, Illinois. So we got Illinois and Baylor going at the same time, with potential to cash, and we've cut down all that risk from laying 25 and a half points. There's no reason to do that. The North Carolina Wisconsin game, I am saying that's a dangerous game. Walk away from it. I think North Carolina is getting hot at the right time, and I think that they look real good. They are a 1.5 point favorite, which is just way too attractive. 1.5 in one of these NC2A games. At that point, you're probably better off money lining it if you're on the North Carolina side. But I think that against Wisconsin, that's a very dangerous thing. Wisconsin has a lot of experience and they're well coached. And I think that you could be looking at an upset there. I don't know that it's the hugest upset, but I'm not passionate enough about what I see on either side to be touching that game. North Carolina, again, they're getting hot at the right time, but they're going up against a very experienced juniors and seniors team with Wisconsin. So that's a walk away game for me. There's too much action to force yourself into a risky game like that. If you look at games and there's any red flags, it only helps you to cross games off of the spread of games for the weekend, because then you're just looking at less and you're breaking less down. So number 8 against 9, it's not really a tremendous upset for 9 to upset 8, but I would walk away from that game. And then Houston, no team in college sports, well, aside from Coastal Carolina during football season, but no team in this college basketball has made more money for me than Houston. I've had multiple games winning, going 4-1, 5-0 on Houston. The Houston game, they're a 20-point favorite. They're probably going to cover it, but I'm not going to touch it. What I like in that game is the first half game total over 63.5. I don't know Cleveland State very well, but I Houston is going to put 40 points on the board in the first half. They just are. They score a lot of points. They're really good on defense, and when threes start falling, there's no stopping them. In fact, I have Houston winning the whole tournament. But 63.5 in the first half. They've the the last 3 or 4 games that they've played, that's happened. And so I feel real good about it. That's my play there. And I'm probably going to look at the Houston team individual total. I think it's at 39. I'm not 100% there on that. I'm hoping that we get a slow start. And then I could jump on Houston first half for over. I'm probably going to jump on them for anything about around 36, 36 and a half. I'm a buyer on Houston. But just going into the game before it even starts, first half over 63 and a half. That's my play. Then we're going into this Nova game, and I'm trying to pull it up on the screen. So I had some notes, but Villanova is an odd one because when you look at these tournaments, Villanova has name recognition. They're a really good team. They won it all a couple of years ago, but Nova is going against Winthrop, 5-12. Nova is hurt. They lost one of their best players a few weeks back, and they're a totally different Villanova team. They're just not as capable as they were in the past. I have in the second round, I have Nova losing to Purdue, but in this first game, it's a 6.5 point spread. I don't know that I'm laying 6.5 taking Nova on anybody. So in this game, I I personally am walking away from it. If you are to play it, I would be taking the points on the other side of it, just because of the way that Nova has been shooting poorly. But again, it's a walk away. And if you are to play it, I would say take the points on the other guy. When we get into Saturday, there's a couple upsets that I like, and I don't really even think that they're upsets. These games, they've only played their conference, so their performance against opponents within the competition in their conference, that's how these rankings got set up. So it's an odd year for college sports in general, college football too. But we're talking basketball, and I'm looking at Georgetown going against Colorado. Colorado's played against a really weak Pac-12. I mean, Oregon State won a game that they shouldn't have won against a top-ranked team a couple weeks ago. So I actually have Georgetown winning that game outright against Colorado. It's a 6 point spread. So my approach to that game is going to be to take the points. I'm also going to look at a Georgetown first half over, which is I last time I looked, I believe it was at 32, which that's a good one. Teams that win games are scoring over 32 or 33 in the first half. If you do the math, 33 plus 33, that's 66. That's a very low score for a high performing team. So I like Georgetown. I'm placing a unit on them and taking the points, and I'm going to place a quarter unit on money line for Georgia. So if you're looking for an upset, I'd go there. The other one, I live in Kansas City, and the University of Kansas, that's our pro team here. I mean, that's our pro basketball team. The city bleeds Chiefs, loves Royals, but if I had to rank the teams in Kansas City, I would say it goes Chiefs, then it goes KU, and the Royals are kind of somewhere in there if they're playing well. And this is the worst KU team I've seen for a while. I don't know that KU is going to lose this game to Eastern Washington, but I do know that it's a 10.5 point spread. So what I'm looking at there, KU typically is a second half team. What I'm looking at there is Eastern Washington taking as many points as I can in the first half. The first half is 7.5 last I looked. I would take Eastern Washington in the 7.5 in the first half. That's a safe place to go. But if KU lost outright, that wouldn't surprise me. It just wouldn't. They should win the game, but I believe that KU, that's just a bad play to lay 10.5 points there on a team that is just they've played a pretty weak Big 12. This is a disappointing season for the Big 12. The other upset that I really like, and I'm playing it with a full unit, taking points. I'm playing a full unit on the money line, and it doesn't really matter to me who wins it. USC is going to play the winner of Wichita and Drake, and it's looking like it's Wichita State. Wichita State can shoot. I mean, these guys are fast and they can shoot, and I think that they're going to catch USC off guard. I've watched some Wichita State games, and when they get to shooting, Teams, they frustrate teams, and for whatever reason, Wichita State finds themselves in the bonus and double bonus early in games. So I have Wichita State flat out beating USC, but at minimum, I would give that a look and take the points there. The spread is not official yet because Wichita State or Drake they need to end this game that's going on right now. But last I looked, Wichita State was ahead uh, by 11, and we're at halftime right now. So there's that one, and then I'm not going to go through every single game on Saturday, but I like Ohio against Virginia, and I'm going to give you some reason why. Virginia is a defensive team. Virginia typically they're holding teams to 60, right around 61 points a game, but they also are not scoring points. They're under 70 points average per game. Ohio, in these last 3 or 4 games, they're monsters on the boards. Their guys are taller than you would expect out of a MAC team. They are monsters off of the boards, and threes are falling. They just took one of the highest scoring teams. In fact, Buffalo, I think, is the second highest scoring team or third highest scoring team in the country, and Ohio beat them by like 14 to win the MAC. I'm taking Ohio again, money line, and I'm laying the points on that 7.5 point. I'm going into the first half. I'm taking first half over. The over under for that game, Ohio is 28.5 for the first half. That is a very low number, and Ohio averages over 80 points a game. So I really don't care about Virginia being a name you recognize, being a defensive team in the zone and all of that. Virginia's not shooting well, but Ohio has been really great off the boards. Threes are falling, and they're a team that averages over 80 points a game. So between Virginia holding teams to under 61 a game and Ohio averaging around 83 or 84 points a game, somewhere in the middle is the reality. So even if we met in the middle there, if we met in the middle right at 70, we'll break that in half. That's 35 points in the first half. And Ohio, the first half over for them is 28.5 points. And because I like that first half over on Ohio, that means I also like the first half over for the game total, which is 61.5. So at minimum, Ohio against Virginia, that's a juicy game. I'm going 61.5 over first half. I'm going Ohio into team total over 28.5 on that game. I love that game. In fact, I have Ohio because of how impressive they've looked off the boards and with threes falling. I have Ohio actually 2 upsets in a row in a bracket. I don't know what the spread looks like when they get to the second round. So as far as where my investment goes, I'll have to revisit that when we get into this second round matchup, which I believe is against Creighton. But for this Ohio Virginia game, Ohio first half over 28.5, game total over 61.5. These are very low over unders. I think Vegas is sleeping on that one. And then the other one I'm looking at, Florida State is one I would stay away from. Florida State, looking at a bracket, I have them going pretty far. But Florida State is a team. They're not really big. They just don't have a ton of size, and they live and die by the three. And I realize that you could say that about just about any team in this tournament, but I don't see them losing to UNC Greensboro. But what I don't like is the 10.5 points, because Florida State, if threes are falling, they're scoring. If threes are not falling, that 10.5 points, they could win that game by 9 and really burn you. They could win the game by 10 and really burn you. So I would say stay away from Florida State. Give that game a couple minutes. If threes start falling, if they get ahead by like 6 or 7, then I would hit a live bet real quick. And then you could go back in and take the 10.5. But let that game get started and see how they're playing. But I wouldn't just walk into that game laying 10.5 points on Florida State. And then let's see. Yeah, I mean that's what I'm looking at for this weekend. I got some football plays that I'll send to anybody that sends me a message. FCS football has been really great. They're now doing live betting. They're doing live betting on a couple teams that they've now put on ESPN2, so you can actually watch these games. And so it's not just betting ahead of time, and you don't have to do all this research. But 2 weeks in a row now, I've hit double-digit underdog money lines on FCS football. So if you're looking at football this weekend, let me know. I doubt many people will be, but again, I'm in the money making business. I'm not watching any of these games to be a fan. I mean, of course, it's fun to watch sports, but I mean, I'm trying to pay bills, and that's what this does. So message me direct if you want any action, and just please keep in mind what you put on your bracket and the upsets you're looking for and the crazy wow story that doesn't necessarily translate to cashing tickets and point spreads and where the value is. I just walked everybody through the value. I'm going to post a couple of these. I've been pretty hesitant to publicly post all my picks because, again, the last series of picks that I put up pregame, they just haven't done very well. And the magic behind what I'm doing is all of this in-game stuff. And the guys that have messaged me direct, I called him out last week. I gave Andrew about 8 winners in a matter of an hour this past weekend, and I shot a couple over to Elliot. But if you message me, you got to have fast fingers. You got to be in front of the screen because I'll hit you right back if I have something. And Colin, you're on the call. You can miss them very quickly. But you can also catch some real value, and it's far more important
It's
than
insane how quick you can miss them.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
I got locked
and
in
then
on
it
one last night that, when I hit the confirm button, the line was one thing, and then when it actually went through, it was point and a half lower. I was like, oh
and
man,
and you got to be careful with that too, because if you hit retry, you might lock yourself into a number you didn't really want, and then you got FOMO, and it's hard to walk away.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
all right,
And
well
you're
that's
spot on. On the other side, it can be great because you can have like 5 whole seconds where the spread goes to exactly what you want. If you got fast fingers enough to lock it in, then boom, you're good to go. But
yeah,
you
and
got to do it in that 5 seconds or whatever it is.
yeah, and what you and I did the other night um with hockey and the things we had, that's a good lesson because I we got ahead of ourselves and we hadn't cashed a ticket and we got saved
Hmm.
by it because we made the right moves. But I kind of took yesterday and didn't do any sports just to kind of regroup and break down some of these games and scenarios that could come up that I'm ready to jump on because I that it was reckless and what we did was gambling, and I that's just not what I'm trying to talk about on this page. We're talking about investing and minimizing risk, and so that's why I pressed on that point earlier. You got to cash a ticket. You got to cash that first ticket. If you don't cash a ticket, um that's just not a good place to be, and I wouldn't dip into the same game if you don't cash a ticket if you lose that first one, because that means the game's not going the way that you read it, and forget about your testosterone. That doesn't pay your bills. So, questions, Colin, Chris, you guys got any questions? Anything you want me to go over? I somehow talked for 30 minutes straight again. Cool. Well, I hope everybody cashes some tickets. Have a happy beginning to March Madness. There's a lot of winners out there, and send me messages direct. I hope people listen to this recording before they fill out brackets or lay their action, and let's have a good week. We'll do this again next week because we're gonna have I think next week at this time we're gonna be looking at Sweet 16.
Yeah, baby. Just so
Talk to you
happy to
guys
have
later.
March Madness in general.
Yep.
Later, all. Thanks. Thanks.